Hi, I'm Jeff Iles from the Department of Horticulture at Iowa State University, and we're out here on a beautiful spring morning to talk about pruning. And this is another pruning video in a long series called Principles of Pruning. And today we're going to focus on a smaller ornamental tree. Last time we talked about shade trees and the importance of developing central leaders, but this is a different kind of pruning exercise. So the tree we're going to focus on is a tree lilac called a Pekin lilac, P-E-K-I-N. And the particular selection is one called China Snow, really a beautiful plant. And as we go through the video this morning, the pruning exercise, you'll see what a beautiful bark this tree has. What we're trying to do with an ornamental tree is not to alter its growth habit. We're trying to go with what the tree gives us, but we're going to pay attention to those lower branches. How many lower branches can the tree accommodate? We want to make sure the tree fits on the site both today and 20 years from now. And of course, when we prune a tree, we always have a view towards the future. And finally, we want to look for rubbing and crossing branches, those that might cause injury to the plant if we have a high wind event. Remember, what we're doing here today is done in the spring of 2021. This pruning thing should be done on an annual basis. You don't let a tree get out of control and then try to rein it in, or you don't let a couple of years go without paying attention to the tree. Every tree in your landscape, whether that be a home landscape or a commercial landscape that you maintain, should be looked at every year. And if you do that, if you get into that habit, into that routine, then you don't end up with problems that are too large to handle. So as you see, this tree is sitting in a really prime location. And let me tell you first that the tree someday could grow to be a height of 20 feet tall and about 20 feet across. So I want to make sure that the tree doesn't outgrow the site and cause problems for pedestrians or people that just might want to hang out underneath the tree. When I look at a tree like this, I try to envision where is my permanent lower branches, where will they be in the future. Right now this tree has all kinds of branches, and that's good. Those branches are feeding the tree. But someday I might want to raise the canopy some. And so when I prune this tree, I'm going to have an eye towards lifting the canopy some, but also looking for branches that I might reduce and then come back and remove at a later time. So I've identified this branch here as one that down the road could become a problem. It's awfully low on the tree, and if somebody wanted to sit under the tree, it could be an impediment. And so I have two options. I can remove the branch this morning, take it completely off, or I can do something called suppression. I can suppress the branch. That is, I would remove a portion of it, and what that does is slow the branch's development down. And so when I do eventually take it off, it leaves a much smaller wound. That's the game in pruning, is I want to leave the smallest wound possible. So a suppression cut on this branch would mean, instead of taking it back to its point of origin, I would suppress the branch, take this part of it back to this point here, leaving this to continue on probably for another year. But by taking this part of the branch off, I'm going to slow its development back here. And again, when I eventually do take this branch off, it won't have grown very much, and it will create for a smaller wound. So I'm going to take off my handy saw here and do the suppression cut. I'm first going to remove the weight of the branch so I don't cause any damage, and it's a pretty easy maneuver. And then my final cut is back here. And that's where I'm going to leave that particular branch. Now, in years to come, probably next spring, I would come back and remove the branch here, back at its point of origin. And hopefully by suppressing this branch, the growth diameter back here will be smaller.
And so why wouldn't you just take the branch off right there, right now, today?
We could do that today, but I also try to make sure that I'm not taking too much tissue off at one time. Remember that the leaves that form on this branch are feeding the plant. It also might be too big of an aesthetic hit. My goal whenever I prune a shrub or a tree is to make it look like nobody's been here. So I've identified another branch that is small, but someday could cause a problem with rubbing or crossing. You can see how these branches are awfully close together. And so this could be a permanent scapular branch here someday. This one looks like it's going to be interfering. So instead of suppressing it, I'm just going to remove it totally, and again create a more open environment for the branches that remain. I'm going to remove the weight first. I think that's always a good idea in the spring of the year. Sometimes the bark will slip or rip pretty easily in the spring of the year. Now we could do the 3-cut technique. We practiced that last time, where we make our first cut on the underside, our second cut on the outside of that. And if the bark happened to rip, it would stop at that undercut. Didn't happen this time. That's good news. And then I'm going to make the final cut, not flush, but just outside the branch collar as we've talked in previous videos. That was easy. So we're on the back side of the tree, and on the back side there's a large picture window that looks into a little cafe here on campus. Remember, someday this tree is going to grow about 20 feet across, and if this branch were not pruned or not addressed, it could be into the side of the building. So that begs the question, what do I do here this morning? And again, instead of removing the entire branch, I'm going to perform another suppression cut. And so let's take the weight of the branch off first, about here. And now we'll make the final cut back here. Beautiful. Then I start looking for anything that might have died over the winter. I don't really see much. There's a branch here that looks dead, so I might take it off. But this tree really is off to a really good start. It's a little bit crowded. Here's another branch that's kind of getting in the way over here. I might take it off. I might just take off. Remember, when you make a pruning cut, you're always pruning to a branch's point of origin. You're never pruning mid-branch like that and leaving it. You're always pruning back to a point of origin. Some of this is just, it's not science, it's art. And remember, trees are not meant to look perfect. You know, what we're trying to do here this morning is work with what the tree is giving us. So we've thinned branches that might interfere with each other, but I'm not trying to force this tree into looking like a shade tree. I'm not worried about central leaders, but I am also taking a long view as to where my lower branches someday will be. In fact, maybe this is my first permanent scaffold branch sometime down the road, which means that everything below that is temporary. So you might ask the question, when do you put the pruners down? When do you put the pruning saw away? Because the temptation is to keep pruning, and then you stand back and you say to yourself, uh-oh, I might have gone too far. And so that's why whenever I take a branch off, I usually take a few steps back and look at the tree in toto to make sure that I haven't left a hole or have done too much. And hopefully I recognize that before I take too much tissue off. And then you have to know when to say when. It's nice to have bark to look at, and this kind of peeling, exfoliating bark is really quite beautiful. The tree doesn't have many, if any, significant disease or insect problems, so it's good that way. So we're focused on pruning here this morning because that's something that we sometimes neglect. We sometimes forget about. And even young, small trees like this can use a guiding hand, which is going to pay dividends down the road.